And we're live.
Welcome. I thought you were starting. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right. So, welcome to Current Status episode. I believe this is 15. My name is Teresa Miller, and I can be found on Twitter at 24/7 IT Connect.
And I'm Puma Schmidt, also known as Exchange Goddess on Twitter. And tonight we're actually joined by a special guest co-host. Since Melissa Vimes is unable to make the show tonight, our guest is Trevor Potts. Trevor, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, not really, but I kind of will, I guess. I'm Trevor. I am Cake Not a Lie on Twitter. It's actually underscores in between the not. And otherwise, I guess I am going to pass it over to the show's actual guest today, and the intelligent person on the group, Mike?
Yeah, I'm just semi-intelligent. Everybody else is smarter than me. I'm Mike Nelson. I Twitter handle of No Media, and I'm a virtualization kind of a guy that deals with a lot with VDI, which we're going to be talking about tonight, I guess, and anything else you want to talk about. Especially, you know, beer. Beer is always good. If you want to talk about that.
Oh, you got Stella.
Yeah.
Trevor, what are you drinking?
At the moment, cranberry juice.
You're no fun today. And weren't we just tweeting about Weren't you just tweeting about having a Canadian beer?
Yes, but then I ran out. It's just sad. Apparently, when you drink them, they're gone. Who knew? Why can't I just take snapshots of the beer, clone them?
So, Mike, you've been doing VDI for some time now.
Yep.
And I think that you probably have done a lot with the Citrix VDI. So what we wanted to talk about today was some of the trials and tribulations that go with VDI deployments. And so to get us started, maybe we could talk a little bit about what you think about VDI and Citrix as a platform, and then maybe move into how organizations are using it.
Okay. I actually cut my teeth on Citrix VDI, but before that, there was, you know, there always was VDI. There was remote desktops, right? Mm-hmm. So terminal services was always there, remote desktops were always there. So that's where it all really started. Getting into heavy VDI, as I call it, when you start dealing with enterprises that have, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 desktops, you start looking at at their infrastructure, and you ask the questions, why are they even doing it? Because that's the first thing I go in and I ask, and I say, hey, why are you even doing VDI? What, is there a good reason to be doing it? And I have to tell you that more often than not, I've had people come back and say, yeah, it was cool. It was something we wanted to try out. You know, back in 2008 when VDI was the next biggest thing, everybody wanted to do it. And now the kind of luster is worn off, you know, because it's expensive. It doesn't necessarily always solve the problems that everybody thinks it will. So more often than not, I've run into situations where people were in VDI and they wanted to get out, or they were getting into VDI and they got in, they just did a small bit, you know, and then they moved the rest of it just back to remote app delivery. Yeah, because remote application delivery was good enough, or it was the answer that they needed. So
what advice would you give customers in terms of coming up with those use cases so they're not paying for like that $1,200 VDI, making sure that it's suitable for their business model?
Well, the first advice that I give them is to find out exactly what the use cases are. Okay, what specifically your users are going to be doing. Do they need a full desktop? Is it something that they need an actual, you know, I get people that come back and say, well, my users need to be able to change their background. you know, or they need to be able to you know, install their own apps and do this and do that. Well, sometimes that's not the best business case for a virtual desktop when you look at the overall cost and the administration that's involved. So my advice is to first look at what are users really going to use this for, number one. Number two, look at how much money you want to spend, because anybody who tells you that this is inexpensive is lying to you. Okay? You're talking about storage, you're talking about network, you're talking about, you know, everything else under the sun that is involved that people just don't plan for. And you know, you get these people who just think, we're going to go VDI, we're going to throw VMware View in, we're going to throw, you know, Citrix in, whatever, and this thing is going to rock, and all of our developers over in Dubai are going to be happy that they have their full desktops and they can do whatever they want. No. That most cases that just doesn't work. So those are my initial things that I tell people is understand what you're getting into. Just don't jump on the ship because you have an overzealous salesperson, or you have a promotion that VMware actually did where, oh, you have our server virtualization, you own it, you're paying an unbelievable amount for it. Why don't we give you 50 seats of View, and we'll give it to you for free for a year, and you can go ahead and deploy it, and then you have to pay, you know, unbelievable amounts of money every year after that for it. But people have to be cautious of that, and I think IT's gotten smarter about it.
What do you think is the most common mistake enterprises make when they make that decision to get a VDI, or even attempt it?
I think it's well, I think there's actually two, and, well, there's more than that, but I think that I've run into, yeah, there's a lot more than that, but I think that I've really run into two major ones. Number one is cost. They don't realize how much it costs, and number two, they think it's the end-all, be-all, that it's going to solve all the problems. And,
it's the unicorn.
Yeah, you know, newsflash, it's not. You know, VDI, and I got to say that you know, Brian Madden and Gabe Panu said it the best. You know, VDI delusion. That's what it is. It was a delusion, and it was something that was, you know, brought up, and sure, it fits. Certain things it does, niches, and for certain businesses, you look at construction, you look at K through 12 education, you look at healthcare. Some of those are really good examples of how VDI can work. Okay, but when you get into large enterprises, you know, sometimes it just doesn't cut it. You have to rethink what you really want to do. And I can tell you that I would say, you know, 7 times out of 10, just plain old, good old remote application delivery foot the bill.
That's interesting that you say healthcare. I work in the healthcare industry, and VDI is actually pretty popular.
Yeah.
And obviously, because, you know, with hospitals, a lot of your remote sites. But I also worked in a regular enterprise where we sort of attempted it, we tested it, and it just didn't.
Yeah.
It just didn't suit us very well.
Yeah, and I had the same thing when I was dealing with, you know, a large Fortune 200 company here that I worked for, and they had people that were across the pond. Okay, so by default, across the pond is a minimum 250 millisecond latency. Okay, you try and push a desktop image, just even screen scrapes across that link. Okay, you've got so much lag involved there that people find it really difficult to work. And that's what they ran into, is they thought this would be the ultimate tool for all the developers. But what they ended up doing is they had an investment in VDI. They said, we can't get rid of it. We're going to keep using it. So what did they do? They actually took physical hardware and put it up in the data centers over across the pond, okay, and ran the VDI from there. They had adminned it from here, but they put their hardware in the data centers over there. And that's just because they had an investment in VDI that they didn't want to throw away, you know.
I think it's interesting that you both mentioned healthcare as well, because I had previously done about a 10-year run in IT healthcare. And the VDI model there was it really did work when you had just committed to like one or two different types of desktop images. It's really great for the healthcare professional that wants a desktop to get at their main application, maybe some email, and then they don't need to keep a special background or any customizations. They can get in, get out, and do it like from a tablet, and it's super easy.
Well, with healthcare, I think there's a lot more regulations too, from a security aspect. So everything is more standardized, simplified. Because does the nurse really need to have all these apps? No. They log on through a thin client, email, certain apps, and that's it. You lock them out of those other apps, because they really don't need it. Minimize what they really need, and I think that's why healthcare really works with VDI, or VDI works with healthcare a lot better than regular enterprises. Trevor, do you have any questions? You've been testing some VDI.
Well, I've been using VDI actually for over a decade now. I deployed my very first VDI before VDI was a thing, before we were, really
Before it's hip.
Well, before we had any of the technologies that make it really workable today. I remember actually, of all things, and as God is my witness, using Microsoft Virtual Server 2005 and lighting up client instances in there. I have seen the worst and the best that VDI can do, and I hate to be the dissenting voice here, but it really can work in some truly exceptional environments as well. So some of the things that I've encountered is that when I start throwing in some of the ecosystem stuff, going beyond just what Citrix has to offer or what VMware has to offer, and moving to, say, for example, Cortado for printing, or Liquidware Labs for user experience management, NVIDIA for making sure that the graphics don't suck, and now that I've played with NVIDIA's graphics stuff, I kind of can't go back to pre-NVIDIA VDI. It spoils you, so if you do play with it, be aware of that. But the thing that again, I have to reiterate something that Mike said. If you go into VDI thinking that you're going to save money, you're already going to lose, because your expectations are completely wrong. I found a lot of use cases in which VDI is great, and the latency isn't a big deal, especially if, for example, you're talking about a centralized server setup and you're handing out desktops to people within the same province, for example. Latency is okay, but I think the biggest problem that people have with VDI is both. It's a combination of expectations that are unrealistic and not hiring somebody who knows what they're doing to implement it. They just buy what the sales guy says and thinks we can roll our own because the software is that easy. It's not. You really need to get somebody who knows what they're doing to put it together, and it starts with, what do you want to do with your VDI?
But isn't that the problem, though? I would think that's the problem, where enterprises roll it out without really getting that expertise involved, because they follow what the sales guy sold them.
Well, I agree, but
I think Kool-Aid. It's so easy, it just works.
I think the expertise is out there now, and Mike is a good example here.
I'm not a good example.
Oh yes, you are. But Mike's one.
You are.
And that's more than most.
He's just one person. I mean, I would say it takes a team to run the VDI shop. It would have to.
Well,
it does.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is that back when VDI was really kind of booming, with enterprises, IT thought they knew everything. They thought that this was a slam dunk, right? And they would go to their users and they would actually tell their users, hey, you know what? We're going to give you exactly the same thing that you see on your desktop today. It's not going to be any different. It's not going to be slower. You're going to be able to do this. You're going to be able to do that. You're going to be able to change your screen. You're going to be able to all kinds of cool stuff, right? They put it in, and then they had to backtrack. Okay, they set the user expectation too high, and that really pissed off a lot of users because they got it and they're like, I don't have user customizations. I don't have profile management. I don't have folder redirection. I don't have, all this stuff. I don't have NVIDIA. I don't have the Nutanix backend today that can, spin up, persistent disk like or the Atlantis solution that can do that. None of that was around then. And that kind of really set the whole thing back in terms of it was almost like kickback against IT. They were saying, you guys are losers, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. This isn't my desktop.
I want my cats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, dogs. Sorry.
It's more than just the small things, like I want my cats or I want my background. What really I have found makes the big difference is people end up using this VDI instance for repetitive tasks that they're doing, 100, 500, 1,000 times a day. And even a little bit of lag that gets introduced into something that they're used to performing in exactly one way, and the latency is always the same when it's on a physical desktop, etc., etc. If you move that sort of thing into a VDI environment where they're used to going next, 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 enter, click, 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 next, 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 enter. The big problem that you're going to have with that is as soon as you move it into a VDI environment, you have a chance for contention. Not the performance isn't exactly the same all the time, and they notice it, and they notice it subconsciously, and they become very agitated about it. It's not behaving the way that they're expecting.
Yeah, I will. I'm not going to be all bad-mouthing VDI because realistically, VDI has a place. It really does. And like you said, Trevor, there are instances where it works fantastic. It's perfect. It really is. It works really well. Tight quarters. Not expensive WAN links, stuff like that. And with the new video, the NVIDIA stuff, the FrameHawk coming out with Citrix, HDX, the PCYP with Vue, the Nutanix solution, the Atlantis solution on the stores. They've been fighting for years on the whole persistent desktop and non-persistent desktop scenario, caching in RAM, not caching in RAM, so on and so forth, all that stuff. It is matured. It's gotten to a point where, maybe VDI is a good solution for certain things, but overall, everybody that did it previously is like scared, and I'm sorry, I was about to swear, but scared crapless. Saying, hey,
yeah, you can swear.
Okay. I don't know. They're scared shitless. They're saying, hey, we tried this once before. We're not going to go back to the well and say, hey, we want to do this again because everything's cool now. Unless they get a whole new management, they get a whole new budget, they get a whole, everything else, or they get a champion in there that says, hey, you rah-rah, VDI, we got to do VDI, we got to get everything else out. A lot of them are running scared and just saying, hey, let somebody else do it. See if it works first.
Well, maybe they can somehow bundle some of those costs with other projects too, like Flash. VDI isn't the only reason to use flash disk, for example, so maybe they can be creative with some of that and kind of double up and take advantage, so it's not the only thing they're going to the well for.
Well, and it's the same like half your costs are Microsoft. I mean,
yeah.
When you look at what the cost of an individual VDI VM is, there's Microsoft, and everything else put together is dwarfed by it.
They've gotten better, though. I mean, the VDA licensing has gotten better. Microsoft realized it after they were charging everybody crazy amounts of money. Now the VDA license is a little bit more manageable, especially with Windows 10. Well, Windows 8, kind of, when they go to 10, it's going to be subscription-based, so once you pay a subscription for it, then it's really not that, what is it, $70 a year or $69 a year, whatever they're going to charge for it. And that includes a VDI instance. So I don't think that's going to be as big an impact anymore, the operating system. Not only that, but there are other avenues that are coming to light here. I mean, look at VMware. VMware is certified CentOS now on Vue. That there are people that are using Linux desktops. Believe it or not, there were people that they talked about it a lot years ago, but nobody. There were people that were hiding in the corner, in the dark area. And now they've actually, they're coming up. it's not in my opinion, it's not just a Microsoft world anymore. And things are expanding.
I have to admit to that. I mean, I myself use both a Windows 7 and a CentOS desktop for VDI, and I mean, if you actually look at my desktop, I use Remote Desktop Manager, which, by the way, if you're going to do a whole bunch of remote work, absolutely just one of the best applications out there. And it's got 20 tabs open to all the different things that I'm remoted into. At least 4 of which are individual desktops that I use for different purposes. But having used VDI for so long, I think that is of itself a bit of an important thing. It's individual desktops can become used for individual purposes, and an entire desktop environment can become much like the way we would use tabs in a browser. So licensing becomes an issue with that, and remote desktop services, as you said, it can make that a lot easier in that a lot of the lighter workloads can be moved over to RDS instead of VDI.
Right, and I want to take this a step further even. My previous life, before my life where I am right now, I was with a service provider that actually did desktop as a service. And I worked as an architect for them, and they actually had, Microsoft desktops served through Citrix that people, education, construction, a couple other industries that they focused on, but they were also a reseller. So we would sell 200 seats, 200 desktops, and these people would connect, and they would connect to their desktop. And it was just sitting in a big cloud, if you want to call it that. But there were companies signing up for this because they didn't want to pay. Number one, they didn't want to pay for IT. And number two, they didn't want to pay for hardware. And a lot of these people were remote, so they were all over the country. And they didn't really have a central office, or maybe they had a central office that had a couple people in there, but everybody else is all over the country. And they were like, we don't want to give them laptops. Okay, so it's a whole BYOD thing. Why not just give them BYOD? They connect to however they want to connect, with whatever device they want to connect, and then, we give them a desktop. And we actually put their custom apps, like construction apps and QuickBooks and stuff like that. We would actually install that so they could share it and they could allow their users to use it. So that's another avenue that some smaller companies, because it's more cost effective. If you think about it, what are they paying? Like $10, $20 a month for a desktop? Depending on usage, it's not a big deal.
And the beauty of that, and this is, where I started to really fall in love with Supermicro, was getting into some of these.
You fell in love with Supermicro? Really?
Yeah, honestly. They have
You're easy to please. You are easy to please.
No, actually, I am. As a small business administrator, you give me good equipment at a reasonable price, and don't charge me a license to use the IPKVM feature built into the baseband management controller. Amazingly, I like you. Not that hard. But with Supermicro, one of the things that I really fell in love with was their microcloud. The idea that I could get a bunch of smallish servers, either small atoms or small Xeons, and set up essentially a physicalization setup. Get a whole bunch of, relatively high density, and then I could go around and I could install, Windows 7 licenses directly onto the physical hardware, and bypass some of these Byzantine licensing rules, because the individual desktop was dedicated to the user, and that brought with it the remote access licensing. And this was, and so there were a whole bunch of different ways that people started trying to get around this. For a long time, there was people using Server 2008 R2, lighting up an individual VM per person using data center licenses in order to try and get around it. And, at the end of the day, I think people became so focused on trying to squeeze the costs out of it that they stopped becoming focused on trying to get the best experience out of it. And so now, as you said, we have people who have had good or maybe just mediocre experiences, and they're going back and saying, well, maybe it's worth spending the time and effort and stress and money to attempt to back up physical desktops, which is the reason that IT wants to push VDI in the first place, because if a physical desktop is where the user is going to store all their data, whether you like it or not, and that causes all the problems. But maybe that is actually less stress than listening to the wailing and gnashing of teeth when something has a 1-second stutter bringing up a web page. And this unfortunately becomes the way that IT starts to think about VDI projects. It becomes a licensing nightmare and a cost balancing nightmare, and it becomes one of how do we make the most number of people stop yelling at us, whether it be physical desktops or VDI or whatnot.
That's the primary goal. That's the primary goal of any IT department. Make people stop yelling at us. I mean,
yeah, we don't want anybody yelling at us.
We have a question from Twitter here from Super Tech Boy. He asked, "Will Windows 10 Windows as a Service affect VDI licensing?"
Yeah, and that's what I talked about a little bit. Was Windows 10 as a Service is actually a subscription model, which they were going to actually bring it out with Windows 8. They were going to do subscription. Yeah, people who will have an enterprise agreement, an EA, with Microsoft, actually saw that as a SKU item that you could pick when you went and did your EA paperwork. But it never actually did anything. They never actually, the little, the 1,000 lawyers or whatever Microsoft has, never came up with the actual license agreement to do it. So Windows 10 as a service, as they're calling it now, whatever it's going to be when it actually comes out, yes, that will change it, because realistically, you're going to be running in Microsoft Cloud. Okay. And go ahead, Trevor.
The other side of that, though, is that while what you're saying is very, very true for enterprises, especially those on an enterprise license agreement,
Right.
Don't believe that that is going to make VDI licensing any easier for the small business or those who use open licenses or anything like that, because Microsoft still hates us, and they will screw us with every opportunity that they have.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about it, too, is that they're trying to hook, what, they got, like 10 million people in Office 365 now or something like that? I don't know, some crazy freaking number.
Now, here's the question. How many of those are just enterprise license agreements?
No, I understand it, but they go by number of SKUs sold. Okay, that's what they pump out, a number of SKUs. So it doesn't.
It's just numbers.
Yeah, it's just
at
numbers.
the end of the day, it's the black number at the bottom of the page.
But I'm looking at the progression. I'm looking at the progression of what they're doing. If you think about it, everything is moving gradually. Remember 365? Exchange went first, actually, right? Everybody remember the old EDU Exchange? Okay. The Exchange went first, then it was 365, then it was Intune, which is going to eventually be SCOM in the cloud, or SCCM in the cloud. And all that's going to evolve. You're actually going to have a data center in the cloud, including desktops, that really don't need a data center anymore.
They already do offer desktops in the cloud, and this is why I think that discussion about
Amazon offers that, doesn't?
Yeah, Microsoft does not. Microsoft was coming out with it, but it was scrapped because of the whole evolution of Windows 10. So Mohoro, I don't know if you ever heard of Mohoro. That isn't reality yet. So
I think, however, that it needs to be part of any discussion about the Windows 10 licensing, because my understanding of Microsoft's licensing model on this is basically you have to be an enterprise class customer with an enterprise license agreement, and you have to be of a certain size for them to want you to run your own IT. For small businesses, they want it all to be in Azure at this point.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think you're going to see some differences when it actually comes out. I think because they do have SKUs for SMB, so I think you're actually going to see some of that small and medium business SKUs where they actually show where they can, because for them that's low-hanging fruit, that's quick wins. Instead of moving 5,000 users and an infrastructure of 1,000 servers, they're only moving 5 servers and they're only moving 10 users.
Mm-hmm. And they want that in Azure. They don't want it subscription stuff that you're going to run on your own infrastructure anymore. They
Right.
want all those people to be using desktops in Azure, and I think that's the thing that's going to be the big one.
What they actually want to do, and this is me. This is not Microsoft. This is me, a guy who doesn't know jack from nothing about a lot of stuff. And Teresa can back me up on that, especially if I have a few Long Islands in me. I think that the whole thing with Azure. I mean, I am a huge fan of Remote App. I don't know if anybody's used Remote App, but Remote App to me is killer. And actually, we were doing a session on it in Denver, Remote App versus AppStream. AppStream is something that AWS offers, which is equivalent to Microsoft Remote App. And me and Rick Dillinger are doing that session together. And Remote App, man, I mean, you know how many apps are out there? There's like 1,000 some apps up there already you can pull down. There's Salesforce, and there's Intuit, and there's all these other things. You just pull them right down, plug in your users, have them log into portal.microsoftonline.com, and boom, they got apps.
Speaking of remote apps, what do you guys think of the Apple Watch? I'm just throwing it out there.
Meh.
No.
No. Well, the new iOS update automatically installs the Apple Watch app on your phone. So does that mean I have to go out and buy an Apple Watch?
But really, you got to show one that's 12 grand. I mean, come on. What was that for? I mean...
Well, if somebody wants a $12,000 watch.
Oh, I'm sure. And Lindsay Lohan or whoever, they'll be the first one to get one. But even $345 for a watch, I mean, to me, a Pebble at $100 and some bucks was expensive. I was just like, man, I mean, a Pebble, I have a Pebble. Matter of fact, I have one right here that I'd be willing to sell, give away, because I never wear the damn thing, because it doesn't do half of what everybody thought it was going to do.
Well, you never know. Your watch could do VDI someday. You could have a VDI session in your watch. You just never know.
Yeah,
no.
You could, but would you really want to?
Oh,
yeah.
There would be people that want to do it.
Unless we're wearing like iPad-sized watches on our wrists.
No, this thing monitors.
Create itself and then smite you for it.
Yeah, but this thing.
There will be somebody that will want to do it.
Hologram.
I don't know if you guys saw it, but this thing monitors everything about your body. It does your heartbeat. It does your your breathing. It does all that kind of shit. The thing about it is, somebody even tweeted, "Don't be the person that's going to have sex with the person who has an Apple Watch on, because it's just going to record everything that you do during that time."
Blame it to your insurance provider.
Oh my gosh.
What were you doing last night?
I thought that was clever. I thought it was very clever.
That's awesome.
The spying watch.
But I got to tell you, the worst part about that, and I know we're kind of jumping around. I apologize. It's probably the beer talking. But the worst part about that whole thing, I thought, was a new MacBook. I'm sorry. That's
I'm actually upset because I just bought a new MacBook in October, so I could have waited, but that's okay.
I have to be the only one.
It's got no ports.
Any of it. I haven't seen the announcement, even read any of this stuff about it. It's like, okay, so there's a new watch thing to monitor all of your stuff and send it back to the Americans, and then there's a probably bunch of other new Mac stuff, and it's probably going to monitor you too and send it all back to the Americans.
Back to the Americans. I love this. There's a Canadian guy over here.
Sorry, us Americans, we gotta watch everything.
Funny.
We're just nosy.
Well, no, it's not that you're nosy, it's that you have no privacy laws, and corporations almost have more rights than people there, so if there's going to be a place in this world where, I don't know, the insurance companies manage to start doing some really bad things with your personal data, it's going to happen in the USA first. And, when we start talking about the cloud and remote desktops and all the rest of that, there are legitimate security concerns for some of us, especially when it comes to things like, I don't know, industrial espionage.
Dude, you got to understand, though, our NSA is already watching you.
Yes,
they're probably watching us right now and having popcorn, too.
But the difference is, if I'm putting all that stuff into, for example, a regional cloud that is in my own country, yes, you know what? I bet you any money that all of that's being monitored by the Canadian security services, but then if somebody sues me, all of the different companies, their chain of custody, their you know, who they're answerable to legally, it's all the same laws in the same court. And you know, that, especially for the smaller businesses, that makes a big difference. You just don't want to have the legal teams to go up and argue against any of the big stuff.
Yeah, not in the U.S. The politicians get that stuff.
Looks like our time is just about up. It's getting a little late for Thursday evening, but this was a great show that we had, and I want to thank you, our guests, Mike Nelson, and our guest co-host, our special co-host, Trevor Potts. We had a great time talking about VDI,
Yes.
cats, and the silly Apple Watch, which I don't know. If somebody gives it to me, I'll wear it.
Yeah,
but
hey, you want to buy
We
one?
should crowdfund one for you, P.
Yeah, you want to buy one?
I want the $10,000 one. Okay, I don't want the $350. You know, if you're gonna get me a watch, I want the gold
No,
one.
we need to crowdfund you a gold iWatch. You know.
I want engraved too. Something like Exchange Goddess.
Hey.
Oh my gosh.
Bernard, yeah.
I'm just saying, okay. I'm not asking.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. If you were to get me a gold watch,
It needs to be
just make sure
engraved.
it's engraved on the back.
You don't want the old Agent P, huh? You don't want to.
Exchange Goddess. The back.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
That sounds better.
Yeah. With the gold watch. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So-
Well, thank you so much, Mike and Trevor. It's been really a great conversation. It was really interesting. So you guys have a wonderful evening. And we will be back. Let's see. I think we're back in 2 weeks, right?
Actually, no, we're back
Does that
next
sound right?
week. We're
Oh, we are?
yeah, we're on
Oh,
next
we
week.
have one more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
All right.
we will be on a 2-week break.
Yes.
So
All right.
thank you,
Have a
everybody.
great evening.
Bye.